Welcome to the Med Control Monthly Podcast, brought to you by the Oakland County Medical Control Authority. The Oakland County EMS system is made up of 49 EMS agencies and 15 hospitals that serve about 1.3 million residents, with approximately 250,000 calls for service each year. It requires a constant stream of high-quality information to support such a robust system. The mission of the Med Control Monthly Podcast is to provide the latest information, updates, and trends to and on behalf of the EMS agencies and hospitals of Oakland County, Michigan. This episode was recorded on February 16, 2022. I'm Jeff Lassers and I'll be your host. I'm the EMS System Manager of the Oakland County Medical Control Authority, as well as a full-time firefighter paramedic with the West Bloomfield Township Fire Department. In our last episode, we introduced you to the OCMCA Executive Director, Bonnie Kincaid, as well as John Toit, who is the Quality Improvement Coordinator. Bonnie, John, and I introduced the Med Control Monthly Podcast to our system of EMS agencies and hospitals and discussed the three primary responsibilities of the OCMCA, which include coordinating the EMS system and establish written care protocols for its EMS agencies, as well as ensure physicians, hospital staff, and providers are educated on the protocols. In today's episode, we'll dive deeper into the OCMCA committee, subcommittee, and workgroup structure, discuss what they do, as well as when and how they meet. Then we'll provide a nice, clean, and concise update from each committee and workgroup that met in January or February 2022. The whole purpose of this episode is to get everybody caught up on what's going on in their community of Oakland County, Michigan when it comes to their EMS system. It takes a lot of committees to get this moving down the road, and making people more aware of what's going on is only going to make us stronger. Please visit ocmca.org/committees for more information about our committee structure and processes. You can even download the meeting minutes from each meeting right from the website. Also, check out our website calendar, which provides all of the meeting dates, times, and even Zoom link information for each OCMCA committee and workgroup meeting. Please email us your feedback and tell us what you think about the show, or send us ideas for future episodes to Jeff, that's GEOFF, @ocmca.org. Thank you for listening to the Med Control Monthly Podcast, providing the latest updates, information, and trends to and on behalf of the EMS agencies and hospitals of Oakland County, Michigan. Thank you. Enjoy the show. Good morning, guys. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Fantastic. Bonnie, let's kick it off with you. Who are you? What do you do and where do you do it?
I am Bonnie Kincaid. I'm the Executive Director of the Oakland County Medical Control Authority.
Well, right on. You're my boss, and I work with John. John's not my boss, and I'm not his boss. We just kind of work together. John, who are you? What do you do, and where do you do it?
I'm John. Like Jeff says, we work together. I'm the QI coordinator for Oakland County Medical Control Authority.
Well, that'd be quality improvement for those of you who don't know. And I'm Jeff, the EMS System Manager of the Oakland County Medical Control Authority. And I'm also a firefighter paramedic with the West Bloomfield Fire Department. So today we're here to talk about one of the major functions of the Oakland County Medical Control Authority, which is establishing and maintaining its EMS system through protocols. And our protocol system has to do with a lot of meetings and a lot of committees, a lot of operational groups. Bonnie, in our first episode, we talked about how the major functions of the MCA work together to really support the system. Can you talk about these committees and operational groups together at a high level and explain how they work to support the system?
Sure. We have committees, subcommittees, and operational groups. And they basically do exactly what they're described in their title. We have our committee groups, which starts at protocols, PSRO, Professional Standards Review Organization, and then goes up to Medical Control Committee, which is the advisory committee to the board of directors. And the board is making the final decision. Our operational groups are just that. They operationalize everything that we talk about at the other committee groups. And that's our ED coordinators, our ED physicians, and our EMS operations.
Well, thank you very much. John, we're going to start off with the Protocols Committee. Now, the Protocols Committee is a subcommittee that exists to develop the protocols, policies, and procedures for the Oakland County EMS system. They last met on January 13, 2022. Give us an overview of what happened during that meeting.
So this is kind of an unusual year. This is the 3-year review. So every 3 years, we have to look at all of the protocols in the Oakland County Medical Control Authority.
Every single protocol.
Every single solitary protocol.
So if I open my protocol app and I look and I just start scrolling, there's a lot of them. You're looking at every single one of those.
Every single one of them has to be looked at and approved by the protocols committee, and then every other committee all the way up through the chain, and then approved by the state quality assurance task force. And then at that point in time, they all come back down and we then institute all the new protocols.
So Bonnie, this is John's first 3-year review as a quality improvement coordinator here at OCMCA, but this is like your 50th. So tell us about this year's compared to most.
Well, thanks for that. Maybe the 10th or 11th, maybe. Yes. So by state statute, we have to do this review every 3 years. Now we are a year behind because of COVID. And typically the state of Michigan will do the treatment protocols. And then we as an MCA look at those, change them if we need to, and make updates, and then go on to do the procedures and system protocols for Oakland County. This just is not happening the way the state wants to because they're so busy with COVID activities still. So we took it on the end of last year to say, we're going to do the 3-year review ourselves. We'll help the state out a little bit too, if they want to take any of the protocols that we develop. And so that's why we have to do it. And it's by state law, and it is the 3-year review where we have to touch every single protocol. We don't have to make changes to every single protocol, but we have to review everyone.
Okay. So John, how many sections are in our protocol manual?
We have 11.
And right now you've gone through 1 through 7, or are you on number 8? What's going on?
We started with section 8, the system protocols, because it is one of the larger sections and it is 100% specific to the OCMCA. At this time, the protocol committee will be moving forward, going next to section 7. I know it seems a little bit out of order, but section 7 again has a lot of protocols that are just OCMCA protocols. So they're good places to start, and they're also the 2 largest sections in the protocol workbook. From this point forward, we're not going to be discussing changes to protocols unless there's an emergent issue. We're just going to be concentrating on the 3-year review going forward. During the review of Section 8, we found that there were a couple of protocols that needed specific work groups because they were taking up the entire meeting, just having a discussion. So they deserved their own meetings. And the first one was the response time protocol. The response time protocol denotes how long it should take you to arrive at any specific response. Obviously, there's a lot of concern and discussion on what that standard is set at. So there's been a special meeting to discuss that on February 24th at 9 a.m. We have data that had to be approved by the Professional Standards Review Organization committee. They allowed us to provide the data to protocols so that we can make more data-driven decisions.
So the response time protocol is pretty specific to we get called to something and what is the time standards to go to a priority emergency. And so we have this really big, diverse county with all these different conditions, number of providers, number of calls, distance to hospitals, and all of that. And this thing hasn't been updated in quite some time. So they're really looking at it from a perspective of it was going to take up way too much time in a meeting to figure out. So these special work groups get convened when we find a nuance of something that really has to be focused on this one thing. During a 3-year review, you can imagine there's so many protocols, you get this paralysis by analysis. So sometimes we hit the pause button on a protocol, we pull it out, we say, let's take that to a special work group that it can really be hammered out. Now, another one that happened recently, John, was the mutual aid protocol. There was a lot of heartburn about that one prior to the meeting. Why don't you talk about that work group that met, convened, and had a very productive meeting?
Thanks, Jeff. So the mutual aid protocol was adjusted. One of the jobs that was given to the staff at the OCMCA was to make the protocols the same across the board. So that means if there's a statement in one protocol that affects another protocol, that they're the same. So that's what happened. There was a statement in the agency and personnel participation criteria protocol 8.1. And that protocol had some response time information regarding mutual aid. That language was taken directly from there into the mutual aid protocol. When it was moved directly into the mutual aid protocol, it spurred some discussion and some concern over the language that was in the participation criteria protocol. The group met, had a good discussion. It was actually remarkably one of the shortest meetings I've ever attended in the OCMCA on February 10th. Lasted all of about 8 minutes. There was about 40 people on it, and a proposed language change was provided, discussed briefly, and everybody in the meeting at that point in time agreed that that's the language that it should be. So at this point, that protocol will be going to the protocol committee to start pushing that new protocol and the participation criteria protocol through the system.
John, when you put these work groups together, is it made up of a commensurate demographic of our county? Was it only fire departments that are ALS? Was it only privates? Who was involved in looking at this and assuring that it covered all of the citizens and the types of agencies in Oakland County?
All the agencies were in Oakland County were invited to attend, and they could send whatever representative they wanted to the meeting. And we had representatives at this meeting, both public, private, urban, rural, and suburban at this meeting.
Awesome. I was there. It was literally the shortest meeting I have ever been a part of at Oakland County Med Control. And it proved to me that Zoom is worth the money, because if you could imagine 40 people driving to this building to have an 8-minute meeting would have been a huge waste. So it was very good. So the Protocols Committee is going to meet next on March 10th, 2022. And during that time, John, what do they got planned at that meeting?
At that meeting, we're going to tackle the remainder of the system protocol, Section 8, and the mutual aid protocol, agency provider participation criteria, and the life support agency letter of compliance, which all go together. They're going to be discussed and hopefully moved on. And hopefully we will get into the Section 7 procedure protocols. We're hoping even more that we end up having a new response time protocol for that meeting as well.
All right. So the Protocols Committee currently is going through their 3 review. Section 8 is nearly complete. They're moving on to Section 7 here soon. But before they do, the mutual aid protocol has been updated. That's ready to go. Now he's got to figure out this stinky little response time protocol. Again, that meeting's going to be February 24 at 0900. You could find the information on the OCMCA calendar. So we got this other committee called the ED Coordinators Committee. And now in conjunction with EMS Operations and ED Physicians groups, the ED Coordinators Committee exists to operationalize protocols, procedures, and policies that come out of committee work. It's a pretty lengthy way of saying the ED coordinators meet for their perspective of linking the hospitals and EMS together better from their point of view. So they last met on January 20, 2022. What happened? Give us an update.
Sure. So a couple of real important things that happened at that meeting was the discussion on the 8.51 transfer of patient care to receiving facilities. We really didn't realize how it was impacting EMS when EMS delivers a patient to the hospital and has to get a signature. So we had to look into it from a legal perspective, and then from a state perspective, do we have to have that part in our protocol? And it came out to be that we really don't, by law, have to have it in there, but it is a best practice. So now discussion ensued around that and the implementation of that protocol. And it's going to go back for further discussion as well, because it's important to the EDs that the EPCR gets signed, but EMS doesn't always have time to do so. We have more discussion with ED coordinators about that. We'll also be talking about it at protocols at some point.
For a little bit of context, Protocol 8.51, transfer of patient care to the receiving facility, was asking for a signature from the receiving facility every time, even if you have a patient signature as well. Now, that was a best practice. It wasn't a law thing. It got put into this. And now that it's in protocol, it caused a lot of heartburn. And so it's going back through the system for reconsideration. So in the meantime, it is a protocol. So, Bonnie, what else happened at the meeting?
So the committee also elected a new chair and vice chair. Our former chair moved on. And so we have Emily Baker and Bob Dickerson, 2 of our favorite ED coordinators that will be resuming those positions at the ED coordinators meeting.
Awesome. Thank you very much to Emily and Bob that are going to be helping out on that committee. And Emily, you've been serving for a while. And Bob, welcome back. I know you've been a part of this for quite a long time. The next meeting is going to be on St. Patty's Day, huh? What do you got planned for that meeting?
Drinking. No, just kidding. Although they probably would like that.
That's in the parking lot. Anyway, yeah, so on March 17th, the ED Coordinators Committee is going to reconvene. What are they going to do?
So we're going to continue the discussion on that transfer of patient care protocol. So we have to get everybody on the same page, EMS as well as hospitals, for every protocol. These are the type of meetings where that takes place. So we're going to continue that discussion and then discuss the implementation of the new protocols that are going to be implemented March 1st.
And where did those protocols come from?
Well, those protocols came through the system during the last several meetings and have gone up to the state QATF and are now going to be implemented March 1st.
And that's the same system that basically all of Section 8 is going through now that John talked about. All those protocols are going to go through that same process and they're going to come out in another month, correct?
Yes, the 3-year review will be way down the road, not coming out as implementation anytime soon. But we did have some protocols in the hopper, so they have to get implemented. Those will be on our website. They will be on our EMS protocol app, and it will go out through the protocol app as a notification to all providers.
As we've discussed and provided with the previous protocol updates, we'll provide a spreadsheet with what the changes are.
Yeah, the last time we did that, John, was when we put out some information of protocols that went into effect on December 1, 2021. And we're basically going to put out the same process where we put out a document. Here's the old protocol with all the changes on it. And then here's the nice clean one right next to it, downloadable links on there so that everybody can see them. And what I was trying to express with Bonnie there was, even though we have the 3-year review going on and we're talking about all these protocols coming up, and then there's these other protocols coming out on March 3rd because they were already in the hopper, what we're doing is we're expressing this giant system that always has protocols being evolved, developed, modified, sent through the state through some type of committee. And it is an ongoing, always happening process. There's never a time where we hit the pause button on protocol evaluation or modification. Moving on, the next committee we're going to talk about is EMS Operations. In conjunction with the ED coordinators and ED physicians groups, EMS Operations Committee exists to operationalize protocols, procedures, and policies that come out of committee work. John, on January 20, 2022, the committee last met. Give us an update of what happened.
So at this committee, a lot of the updates happen so that all the EMS coordinators and agencies find out what's going on. One of the things that happened was there was a state data committee appointment. I got appointed to the state data committee.
What's that committee do?
Data committee reviews all the data that goes into my MSIS and how to make that data better. All the nerds down at their nerdery sit down with me and we have some long conversations. And that committee is the one that determines what are the data fields that are required on your patient care records, along with the stuff that makes you NEMSIS Gold compliant.
Well, I'm glad you're on there. It's going to help us because I know having more EMS providers on there that were recently in the field, I think will help.
Absolutely. The next thing was, as Bonnie was talking about the protocols that are being initiated on March 1st, the committee was advised that there are new protocols coming out on March 1st and that we will be providing you some links so that you can see the protocol changes and everything's going to be great and they'll be all out on March 1st. And as we alluded to, there was also some approvals of some protocols going through the system. They stop at every committee and got a fantastic review at System Operations Committee, and System Ops approved them and moved them to the next layer.
So what you're expressing, John, is that every protocol goes through every committee, and then every committee can either make comment for changes or approve on to the next one, right?
Absolutely.
And so operations recently met. There was a ton of protocols that were presented. If not all of them went through with a direct line of sight through the committee onto the next, correct?
Correct.
Awesome. What else happened?
So at ED coordinators, there was a little bit of a conversation regarding PPE requirements for COVID-19. And just a reminder to all the providers out there that the COVID-19 PPE requirements are still in place. That's in the emergency protocols.
What are those requirements right now? What are they requiring that you're getting at?
So they're requiring that you're wearing a mask with all patients. Keep that in mind. That is still there. And when you're in the hospitals, please note the hospitals may have policies that when you're not doing patient care, that you should be wearing a mask in their hospital. It's global for them. So keep that in mind.
The state put out updated protocols regarding masks that were much more stringent than our current emergency protocol for COVID. So I want everybody to understand, if you see a state protocol, just disregard it unless it's in our protocol manual on our website or app, because our PPE requirements are remaining the same and did not go higher like the states did.
So the next thing that was discussed was the COVID-19 vaccine mandate as put in place by the White House. That was most specifically the Centers for Medicare Medicaid mandate, the CMS mandate, that said anybody that is associated with a hospital has to have a vaccine or they cannot operate. There's some question to whether or not that applies to public and private EMS, and there's still some question to whether it applies to public and private EMS. Consult your local attorney and make your own determination as an agency.
John said it best by check with your local agency. Their requirements, their policies are what's going to drive you to do what you need to do. If they have a policy that says, nope, you don't have to have the vaccine mandate, then you don't. That's why it's important to check with your EMS coordinator.
Copy that. So all of the agencies or the agency that I work for, if they require it, I work through them. Not just a generalized thing for Oakland County EMS providers, correct?
That is absolutely 100% correct.
Awesome. So, John, I'm sure you got an update on Ebridge. So Ebridge is this pre-notification application used by EMS to contact the hospital instead of using an 800 radio. And it's a pretty cool app. I know that most of our EMS agencies are either using it or transitioning to using it. And I know that every single Oakland County hospital that receives EMS patients utilizes it as well. Give us an update on Ebridge.
So Ebridge is a special study, so we really can't force anybody to use it, and we're not trying to force anybody to use it, but it is a better way of notification. The Oakland County radio system is going away soon, and it's being replaced. The hospitals, due to the cost, could not get onto the new system, and so Ebridge is the e-bridge for communication that we're going to be using in the meantime or going forward into the future. And so we just want everybody to understand that our hope is that you start using the system, you start sending those stroke notifications, STEMI notifications, and priority 1 and 2 information to the hospitals so that the hospitals can respond back to you and get a call back. Now, we have heard some requests for direct call capabilities for eBridge. There are some hospitals that can't receive a direct call due to technology issues. We're working through that right now, and hopefully we'll have more answers after the next meeting in March.
Yeah, it seems to be going really well. I use eBridge all the time where I work, and I transport predominantly to one hospital. Probably 90% of my patients are taken directly to one hospital, and it's been awesome. However, not every hospital has the same situation. Not every provider goes to such a small number of hospitals. Bonnie, what's your take?
Our operational manager today is actually getting on eBridge and communicating directly with every hospital to test it. And so far, every hospital's answered a direct call. So we are going to make sure this is working 100% for our system, where you can push a button and actually call directly rather than ask for a call back.
Yeah, so some more updates coming out on that. And for more information about the use of eBridge in Oakland County, you can go to ocmca.org/eBridge. On there, you're going to find very short videos of how each of the buttons work, how the whole thing works. There's an interface guide for EMS and the hospital. It's good stuff. John, the last thing that happened at the meeting, you talked about Biospatial, another really cool application or user interface that we use here. Talk about Biospatial and what happened at the EMS Ops meeting.
Biospatial is a search engine used to search your patient care reports. Right now, the information for Biospatial is being taken from the state's data repository, which is MyEMSIS, and going into Biospatial. The state is requesting that the agencies change the direction that their patient care records are going to get into MyEMSIS. Instead of it going straight to MyEMSIS, they're requesting that you send it to Biospatial, and then Biospatial will upload it into MyEMSIS. And the reason for that is so that the data comes into Biospatial cleaner and more data points are accessible for Biospatial. It's because of the amount of data and the way that Biospatial searches. This is a huge advantage for your agencies because your agencies will have access to Biospatial and provide real great patient care reports that you can provide any of your stakeholders on the information happening in your EMS system?
Right now, I go on a call. I fill out my EPCR. Where I work, I use ESO. A lot of people use ESO. I finish my report. Then I lock the report and I send it off. I hit a button and it magically goes to the hospital, and a copy goes to my agency, and a copy goes to Image Trend. And then Image Trend facilitates it getting to my MSIS. That's how it works now. And now we got this new thing called Biospatial. And if I'm understanding correctly, Biospatial is a better tool to get my PCR data from when I hit the button all the way into my MSIS. Is that correct?
Somewhat correct. It's a better tool for searching your data than Image Trend is. It's not necessarily a better tool for getting your information to my MSIS. It's a better tool for extracting the data out of your patient care records that you're sending to my MSIS.
Which will really be helpful for all of our life support agencies, as well as the MCA and everyone else that wants to see data and actually use this data that you guys, the providers, have been putting in since 2010-ish. So this is why it's so important that we're actually going to be utilizing this data in a very positive way.
Okay, so by doing this, what's the ask? What does an agency have to do? When you brought this up to the committee, you know, you got Biospatial, we want you to do this. And there's always, okay, what's it going to cost in time and energy?
So the cost is zero. That's the nice part. And the ask is that the EMS coordinator email me, say, hey, I need the instructions. I email them the email that they have to ask for that transition or whatever you want to call it. And that's it. They have to make that ask to the state. The state then switches a switch and now goes into Biospatial rather than Image Trend.
And by doing that, John, what's the difference? You've been an EMS coordinator at an agency, so accessing your run volume data conveniently, it really does make a difference. What's the difference of you accessing the data through Image Trend, as we classically have, and transitioning to Biospatial as an EMS coordinator at an agency?
It's another tool in the toolbox, and it is a better tool than Image Trend ever was. The reports that you're able to extract from Biospatial are cleaner, easier to obtain, easier to make determinations on specific data fields that you want without having to create data queries that are almost like solving calculus problems. And using, for example, ESO, it's like going and using their old ad hoc version and now using their new analysis version. And it's data that's easier to obtain, and it actually works better than ESO's analysis version.
So the next meeting is going to be March 17, 2022. What's planned?
We're going to talk a little bit about regional protocols there and what's not going on there anymore. We're going to talk about maybes, MFR, and basic EMT epinephrine supplemental agency training. All the protocols that have been updated to this point, and all of the operational group reports reporting out to that committee.
Awesome. Bonnie, anything else going to happen at that meeting?
We always give all kinds of updates at that meeting. So it's why it's great to have all of our providers join in. If anybody wants to just listen in, email one of us and we will make sure we keep you on the committee to get the Zoom link.
Yep, we can always add anybody to the system. These are open meetings. All right, the ED Physicians Committee, in conjunction with ED coordinators and EMS operations groups, exists to operationalize protocols, procedures, and policies that come out of committee work, just like all the other ones. Specifically, this one's for our ED physicians in Oakland County hospitals. The last time they met was January 27, 2022. Give us an overview of what happened.
What a great meeting we had. Probably one of the best in recent history that we had with our physicians. Now, typically we use our physicians subcommittee to ask questions, clinical questions about protocols. They're there to provide the clinical judgments on all protocol questions. But this committee meeting, we talked about a whole new dynamic that is going to be so cool going forward. They talked about the transportation protocol potential changes for stroke patients. And this is 3 years in the making. And that gets back to our stroke protocol and the changes that are coming up to our stroke protocol. And that's going to be in the future a little bit, but it's coming up. And our physicians unanimously voted to go forward with looking at this and figuring out how to do this. So the right patient gets to the right hospital the first time.
Now, that's the case for every emergency. And over the last, decade, 15 years, there's been a really big renaissance in stroke care trickling down to the EMS systems. And about 5 years ago, we started investing a lot of time and energy into implementing a stroke severity scale called FAST-ED. And it is basically a way to identify and measure a stroke, giving a number from 0 to 9, producing a number that essentially says how bad a stroke is once you find one. The difference is if you compare that to what we traditionally use, the Cincinnati Pre-Hospital Stroke Screen just identifies the presence of common stroke signs, and there's very few. So the difference is identifying a few stroke signs and calling it a stroke versus calling it a stroke and then measuring a number of other things to produce a number that quantifies how bad a stroke really is. Since then, we've gleaned a lot of things from this. Number one, we know we can train EMS providers to do this very well. Number two, we know we have a lot of EMS providers. We have a lot of hospitals and we have a lot of stroke patients that we can improve their outcomes long-term by more accurately identifying them having a stroke, as well as taking them to the right hospital at the right time so they get those definitive treatments faster. Right now, the physicians committee all agrees if we can expand the number of EMS providers that understand and can articulate the differences and take the right patient to the right hospital, they fully support that. And so right now we're looking at how many EMS providers are actually capable of doing that and how we can increase that number, as well as increase the number of hospitals that are reaching out to EMS to work with them on their stroke acuity. Currently, the stroke transport protocol says you will take your stroke patients to the closest stroke center minimum primary. And what they're currently considering is changing that to a patient with a FAST-ED score of 4 or greater could be bypassed and taken to a stroke center that has interventional capabilities, typically known as a thrombectomy-capable stroke center or a comprehensive stroke center. But more to follow on that. This is very exciting for all the stroke nerds out there like me who've been working on this for a very long time. There is the potential for change, but there's no change yet. We will give you updates as we go on. The next meeting is going to be March 24, 2022. Bonnie, what are they going to be talking about at that meeting?
We will continue the discussion on the transport of stroke patients and how we can get more of our providers trained and educated in the use of FAST-ED so that we have more of our severe stroke patients going to the right hospital the first time. That's pretty much it. That's going to be a full agenda, and we're creating a work group. So we've got people that want to be on this work group, both from physicians, ED coordinators, and our providers to get together to figure out the best way to do this.
The next committee we're going to talk about is the Medical Control Committee, which serves as the advisory body required by law. The MCC makes recommendations to the board of directors regarding protocols and the performance of the responsibilities as the designated medical control authority for Oakland County. They last met on January 27, 2022. Bonnie, give us an update as to what happened at the meeting.
So as we've previously talked about, all the protocols that were currently in process need to hit every one of our committees. And it ends with the Medical Control Committee as the advisory committee to the board of directors. Number one was Protocol 1.3, nausea and vomiting. Several of our medication protocols have been updated. Our cardiac arrest protocol was updated, our TXA protocol was updated, and then our MFR BLS opioid overdose naloxone administration was also updated, along with communications with emergency facilities. Of course, our current emergency protocols were all approved again as written, and those are all still on our website and app under Section 11.
So when these updates go out, we notify all of the agencies and, have 3,000 EMS providers. That's a lot. But we only have 49 agencies, which means we only have 49 EMS coordinators. And we like to get this information directly to them so they can get it directly to their EMS provider. So please, we're glossing over a lot of these updates just to make you aware of them. But for the specific updates, you should actually go look at your protocols because they do change all the time and talk to your EMS coordinator. What else you got, Bon?
So, of course, we talked about the 3-year protocol review process, as John articulated earlier, and we discussed all the special work groups that we have going on right now, which is quite a bit. We have the interfacility transport protocols work group, the mutual aid one that just met, which is hopefully at its end, the EMS response time criteria that John already talked about, and our Ebridge implementation for MCIs.
Well, we talked about two of those, the mutual aid protocol work group, as well as the response time criteria work group. Give me an overview of the interfacility transport protocol work group. What's going on with that?
Some of our physicians in our hospitals would like to see our ALS agencies be able to carry patients on certain drips that are not currently approved under an ALS unit that requires more of a critical care transport. So they're looking at how can we do this to alleviate some of the wait times at the hospitals for these really sick people that need to get to another hospital. Kind of goes back to how we talk about all of our protocols and how we get the right patient to the right hospital the first time rather than the second time and have to do that interfacility transport. So that's going to be discussed, as well as continuing to talk about Ebridge and implementing it.
Along with everything that Bonnie was just saying, adding drips and things like that, we're also looking at taking the protocols that involve interfacility and combining them into one protocol. And that takes a little bit of wordsmithing and a few other minds to look at it. And so that's one of the other things that group is working on taking care of.
As does many protocols, once you open it up for one thing, we often find many others to improve the system. And that's the name of the game, is always making it better. So the other work group you got going on right now is implementing the possibility of some notifications into Ebridge that will support operations for MCIs, mass casualty incidents. Obviously, we're always using Ebridge from here on out, but at the same time, we're always looking to expand its use. In recent times, we've identified a potential use for this device to help us increase the capacity of information from the scene of an MCI to a or all of or a few hospitals. So that work group is coming together pretty nicely. I know they met recently. Bonnie, give us an update.
The whole objective of this is to figure out what type of icons we can implement or develop and implement into the Ebridge app so that it can help our providers and our hospitals when we have any type of MCI going on.
More to follow on that. The next meeting of the MCC committee is going to be March 24, 2022. Bonnie, what do you got planned for that meeting?
So a continued discussion on the stroke patient transport destinations. So that's going to be a big discussion, but the medical control committee always has to approve everything that comes from all the other committees that we've been talking about. So they get a lot of updates and they look at a lot of protocols and then all the specialty stuff that comes up along the way.
Great. Now, our top committee is our board of directors, and it is the business and affairs of Oakland County Medical Control Authority that shall be managed by the board of directors, which is a fancy way of saying they're the top G's. And there's one board of director representative from every single hospital that receives patients from EMS in Oakland County. They last met on February 3rd. It's pretty recently. Bonnie, what happened at the last board meeting?
In addition to all the hospital board members, we also have some ex officio members, and they always give their reports. And specifically, we have the Oakland County Health Division give a report every time we have a meeting, as well as emergency management. They are also called Homeland Security. So those two always give a nice update to our board members. And then on from there, we discuss all the protocols from Medical Control Committee that they formally approved, and then the board formally approves them to be sent to the state. In addition, they also approved the 2022 Letters of Compliance for all our agencies and hospitals. The Letters of Compliance is an agreement between our life support agencies and the OCMCA and the hospitals and the OCMCA. So basically, they have to mark compliant on a whole bunch of things every year on this form to say, yes, they will do this, both from a life support agency standpoint and a hospital standpoint.
And how often do they do a letter of compliance if you're a hospital or an agency?
Once a year in November, and then we approve them by the February board meeting. So it goes through that whole committee process. PSRO looks at them, and then it goes on from there all the way up to the board.
Cool. The next meeting is on April 1st, April Fool's Day. What's planned for that meeting?
Basically, everything that comes out of all of the work groups, committees, and the medical control committee will go back up to the board. Couple of things that are the standouts for this next meeting will be our annual report that we produce internally. The staff puts together of everything that happened at the MCA the year before, and that goes to the board of directors, along with our financials. So the board is the fiduciary for the Oakland County Medical Control Authority. So they have to approve the financials and the financial review and the 990 and all that good tax stuff every year. And that usually happens at the April meeting.
Our next committee is the Oakland County Professional Standards Review Organization, or PSRO subcommittee, and it exists to facilitate system-wide continuous quality assurance and improvement of our EMS to ensure consistent, high-quality pre-hospital care in Oakland County, Michigan. This is essentially a QA/QI committee, and it's a really weird thing to talk about because we're not allowed to talk about what happens at these committee meetings in public. We actually have to sign documents that say we can only discuss PSRO stuff at PSRO. It's kind of like Fight Club. So we can't really give you an update as to what happens, so much as to say that they met, they convene every month, they look at QA/QI, a lot of education and protocol recommendations come out of this committee. Now, I do say things that aren't talked about that are talked about at the committee, but the committee does approve things to be shared publicly. And that's often in the form of our EMS quality improvement program and what all of the education standards, assessment standards, and data really comes out of PSRO in the form of recommendations. One of the other things that the committee does is completes all the investigations of incidents and potential incidents that occur between EMS and hospitals in Oakland County. John, any updates regarding anything we can share?
Due to the sensitive nature of PSRO, we can't share specific information about any specific case. That's why there's a confidentiality agreement. However, some of the recommendations that come out of PSRO is that maybe providers don't understand that if there is a criminal misdemeanor or felony charge against them, they have to report it to the OCMCA and the state. And that's just a little tip from your old pal, John.
What is the time on that? So I get arrested, not even convicted. If I've been arrested and charged for any reason, and what is the timeline per the state law and protocol that I have to notify my MCA?
1 business day.
Okay. What if I notify the state directly instead of my MCA?
Technically, that is still a protocol violation, but it doesn't really matter because any time that we find out about it, we have to hold a special meeting.
So if I get arrested, I have 1 business day to notify you. And if I do notify you, I've taken care of that. But if I don't, on top of all the other legal matters I got going on, I also am breaking and violating a very serious protocol, correct?
That is correct.
And the protocol I'm breaking is just not notifying the MCA.
Correct.
And then what's the ramification if I don't do that?
What happens if you don't report? It can be anything from no action all the way up until a temporary suspension of your license.
Unfortunately, that's true. And that's pretty new to John and I and Bonnie as well. We didn't even realize this was really a part of the law until the last year or so. Again, 3,000 EMS providers, you can imagine that's a lot of different human beings interacting. And sometimes things happen for whatever reason. But when they do, the law specifically says you've got to notify your MCA. That can be an email. That could be a phone call. All that information is available at ocmca.org. If you follow through with just that, you'll at least take one thing off the list after that arrest.
And it does say you're supposed to notify the MCA, not your agency. What I mean by that is you're supposed to notify the medical control. Your agency is not supposed to facilitate that for you unless there's some reason to why you are incapable of notifying.
So the next committee we're going to talk about is the Education Task Force. It's really a work group and exists to facilitate the development of EMS continuing education resources, which are disseminated through the OCMCA CE sponsorship. Our previous meetings were on January 18, 20, and 24th. Our January meetings are always our EMS quality improvement program in services. They all went great. They were super fun. Our next meeting is scheduled for February 22 at 9 a.m. And you can find information at the OCMCA website calendar. It's going to also have a link directly to the meeting if you want to attend that. And at that meeting, we're going to be talking about a lot of the education that we have developed in the last few months and what's coming out on March 1st, which is going to be the patient prioritization course. We're going to have that available through the OCMCA CE sponsorship. So more to follow on the Education Task Force.
Thank you to Bonnie and John for joining me for our second episode of the MedControl Monthly Podcast. Our next episode is scheduled for March 2022, where we will introduce you to key players of the OCMCA and provide you with more system updates. In the meantime, please visit ocmca.org/calendars for more information about the committee structure and processes that we discussed today. You can even download the meeting minutes from each meeting right from the website. Also, check out the website calendar, which provides all of the meeting dates, times, and even the Zoom link information to attend any OCMCA committee and work group meeting. Most of these meetings are open, and we welcome EMS and hospital providers from our system. Please email us your feedback and tell us what you think about the show, or send us ideas for future episodes to Jeff, that's GEOFF, at ocmca.org. Thank you for listening to the MedControl Monthly Podcast, providing the latest updates, information, and trends to and on behalf of the EMS agencies and hospitals of Oakland County, Michigan. Have a great day.